Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 364. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're honored to have with us the nationally recognized writer and celebrated journalist, Glenn Reed.
Very happy to be on this show. I wasn't expecting it, and so it was like, wow, maybe I'll buy the book now.
Searching for the Wild Asparagus, 23 or 22 acres in Newberry, Vermont.
Yeah. Yeah, we had the book release back on April 16th. It was supposed to be in March, but I decided to have surgery in March instead, so it had to be postponed. But it worked out okay. It took a while to come up with that title. Titles are among the hardest things for books or short stories or whatever to come up with. My original title was pretty bland, and then this just kind of popped into my head one night, and I ran it by my partner, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's great, that's perfect." And there's a story behind it that's in the book as well.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you that because your title of the book mentions both 23 and 22 acres, and what's the significance of that detail?
And there's a chapter that talks about that too. It's that how many things in life there are that are so imprecise, or that you think you know something about your whole life, and then you find out something totally opposite. So the thing was, when my parents bought the property back in 74, they were told it was, Vermont, it was about 25 acres. And then years later, they were told, no, it's officially it's 23. And then many years later, I can't remember the time frame, they were said, oh no, it's actually 22. But in your head, it's like, it doesn't change the space itself as it's perceived by you as someone living there or experiencing that landscape. And so I talk about that in other ways, such as, I've been hiking all my life, and like Mount Moosilauke is over in New Hampshire, not too far a drive from Newberry, and I've hiked that probably 13 times, I'm guessing. Wow. And forever it was listed as 4,810 feet, and then they decided, and I remeasure stuff all the time, and it's actually 4,802. So I was like, you mean I climbed less than I thought I did all those years? So yeah, that's kind of the point of that.
So you kind of have this as it's more or less kind of a heartfelt tribute to your parents and the parents' land. So what initially inspired you to write the book then?
I was inspired when back in 2012. There's a long story. I left a job in Eureka, California, and I came back east because my parents getting older and they're needing more help. Things didn't go well, so then I went back out west again to Mount Vernon, Washington, which is in the Skagit Valley, 60 miles north of Seattle. And my partner, his family has a house there in Mount Vernon, and it was your stereotypical rainy northwest period of time. We were there November through April. Winters aren't always that bad, but this was like rain every day. I spent a lot of time sitting on an antique chair in the living room there and doing writing, because I was not employed at the time. So it was actually very productive for me in terms of writing. And I mean, at some point, I think it was when I realized, well, we got to come back to Vermont because, my stepfather was diagnosed with cancer, and my mom had several like knee replacements. Stuff is happening, and I didn't want to be 3,000 miles away. So, but we stayed there another couple months, I think. And I just sat down and it's like, what's coming down the line is, they're going to pass away eventually, and the house will be sold eventually. And I want to write about this place and time because it has always, since we moved there, or they moved there, it's meant so much to me. And I wanted to honor that, not only my parents and any people who were part of that place, or as I put right in the book, all the animals we had there, the dogs and cats that were pets over the years. My stepfather had horses over the years, but also I feel strong ties to landscape, the land itself. And I just wanted to show my appreciation for it through writing about it. And I didn't care whether it sold or not. It's like I needed to do it. And so I did it. And then it was complete in 2013.
Wow.
And I sat on it for like how many years? 10 years, 11 years. In the interim, I self published a collection of poetry in 2019. And then I thought, well, I can't afford to do that again. So, but then I decided a couple of years ago that I wanted to publish another book. I said, I got to do this. My mom had passed away at that point, and my stepfather had sold the house. And it's like, I'm just going to do this because I feel driven to do it, and to also include a lot of photos from that place. So
who would you say, because granted it's a memoir, would you say are your parents, or is the land the main character in this memoir?
I would say all of them, and I would hesitate to call it a memoir because I kind of it's I know it's my experience, but I'm trying to show how I'm honoring the land itself and how it affected me. So I think probably it's both, and maybe it's all three. You're right, but I really wanted to be focused on the land, and I noticed some things when it was done that I didn't realize, and one was that I was focusing on the 22 acres or 23 or 25 um, instead of the house. There's a lot of stuff I could write about the house or the town of Newberry, um, but I wanted to focus on the acreage behind the house. And then I realized after I had laid it all out and picked the pictures, like all the pictures are from that perspective. There's no pictures from facing the house coming down Oxbow Road or Romance Lane.
Wow.
It's always from the back of the house or from the barn or from the track. There's a racetrack around the field because my stepfather was into harness racing.
Wow.
So anyway, and I know that was conscious or unconscious. I think it was a little both.
Well, you just brought up the issue of there's a lot of pictures in there. So how did photography play into the storytelling aspect of the book?
Well, I've taken tons of pictures over the years of that place. Um, uh, so the pictures are kind of they don't always go directly with the chapters that I've written about, because I found that some things I wrote about I didn't have any visuals that matched. Like I'm trying to think of an example. Or skating, there was a pond that formed in the field when I was in high school, and it froze over after when the Arctic front came in after a thaw, and it froze over this pond. And then I went out there skating every night for about a month. And I don't have any pictures of myself skating out there. And I also realized there are no pictures of me. I was always taking pictures, but nobody took a picture of me out on that property. And the only one I could think of, after the house was sold and stuff was distributed, I could never find it. It was one picture I remember of crossing the field with a dog we had, in the 70s and 80s. And, I can see the picture in my head, but I could never find it. So,
So because you had so many pictures, how was the process of choosing which pictures were actually going to go in the book then?
A lot of them were pictures I took that I just thought were good pictures. I liked them myself, and it kind of captured the space, but those were done with a digital camera, so they were more recent.
Okay.
Yeah, so it tried to capture the mood of this landscape, but there were also slides that were taken by other people, from mostly from the 70s, I would say. I'm not
Mm.
sure if they went into the 80s. So there are a lot of those, particularly of the horses and my stepfather and his friends. Um, and there were a few I took with a Kodak Instamatic back in the 70s, which was like the second camera I had after I got a Polaroid when I was like 10 years old. Remember Polaroid, press the
Yeah.
button, it comes out. Um, and then the second camera I got was a little Instamatic before I finally got a 35 millimeter when I was, I don't know, 20 years old or so. I think after working all summer when I was in college, I said, I'm going to save up money and went and bought a Pentax MX 35 millimeter.
Okay.
You know, so, but then, and I resisted digital for a long time. But then I finally got a digital camera.
Right.
Really didn't have a choice. So,
And let me know if I'm misquoting a little bit here, but how did you how did you say? I wrote this down. Universal experiences that are unique to every person.
is that contradiction? There are universal. Yeah, I think I contradict myself a lot. Um, Probably in the book too, and I think that's part of it. Is like, is it 25 acres or 22? Is that a pond or is it a lake?
Right.
Is that a continent or is it an island? It's all kind of relative. I
Right.
think, and I think it is universal that some people how people relate to places and times in their lives,
Right.
and it's universal that we can relate to places and times, but it's also every relationship by everybody is to those places and times is unique. Everybody has a unique perspective and unique experiences, and they're all stories. So,
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. And thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. All the flora that exists in a Vermont farm, why wild asparagus?
well, that's you have to read the book to find. And over the years, walking around the track when I went to visit, when my mother was still fairly mobile, we'd go for a walk around the track. It's a half-mile track. Um, I'd keep going after it. Sometimes I was a runner for a long time too, and I ran around the track, and then got bored with it and started running in the back hills of Newberry. But we noticed, notice the flora and the fauna throughout the year. And I think one year, when I was probably in college or grad school, I don't know which, mother pointed out some wild asparagus growing on the opposite side, and I said, "Oh, I didn't even know
Mm.
about wild asparagus." And it was probably mid to late June when she noticed it, and then we noticed another one at the next turn in the track, and so we said, "Oh well, you can eat wild asparagus, but it's too late now. You can't. You have to get it fairly early." So we said, "Well, okay, next year we'll have to remember to go and pick it when it's ready, when it's a good time to be eaten." And every year we'd forget, and we'd go for the walk, and it's like, oh, it's too late to pick it. So it never actually happened that we never actually
Okay.
picked the wild asparagus. So that's why the title came to me. So there's nothing to do with actually searching for wild asparagus except that reference um,
Right.
in the book. And one year, my mom even went out with some ribbon and she tied the ribbon to the wild asparagus. And then actually, there's a third spot where it appeared too. So she tied the ribbon, and it didn't make any difference. We still every year we got busy, um, forgot to do it, and got out there and say, oh, it's too late again. So I've never tried wild asparagus at this point. I've tried fieldheads a few times, and
Fiddleheads are good.
and
Yeah.
ramps, and but
Who would you say this book is for? Is it for people that know Vermont, or is it people that want to visit Vermont, or is Vermont just the background and it's not, as you mentioned, it's fairly universal experience that you're going through?
it's for people who like Vermont, who live here and can identify, but it's also for people who have this view of Vermont, which is kind of idyllic, I think.
Hmm.
But perhaps a lot in the book is not, all idyllic stories, such as
Right.
there's one about, one of the racehorses that missteps and breaks a leg, and the vet has to come over and put him down, and how devastating that was to my stepfather and to myself. So
Right.
I think I wasn't really, when I did the book, I wasn't thinking in terms of, oh, is this going to sell to anybody or not. It's like I wanted to do it, and I also thought about when I go to a bookstore where I gravitate, what sections I gravitate to, and what I notice, and I know that a good cover always attracts me, and so I like the cover. I was like, oh, what is this? And look inside, and also I like to read books. It's not all I read, but I like to read books written by people who are connected with nature, and it's their perspective and their relationship to nature. Um, and some of those books are written by um, more science oriented people, uh, and are a little heavy to read, but others are more prose. It's more prose like writing. So, for one example, there's a book called Braiding Sweetgrass. Not I'm promoting other books by Robin Kimmerer, and
Mm-hmm.
it's that kind of writing. She's a native indigenous person, uh,
Right.
and so that type of writing where people who have an intense relationship with nature, I kind of gravitate to books like that because it's very nature is very important to me. I've spent a lot of time outdoors hiking and or just sitting on the front porch waiting for the hummingbird to come by, or feeding the chipmunk that comes up to the porch at night. So those are the kind of books I like to read once in a while, and they're very relaxing. So I said, oh, maybe there are people like me out there that'll maybe pick this one up because, oh, look at that cover. This looks kind of pleasant.
Right. Well, that you do, because you do mention about these simple moments. You know, the smell of ripening corn, watching your dog run. And how does your, how does this, how does experiencing these simple moments, is this something that's specific to Vermont or specific to, or is this something that you hope readers can see as a, almost as a fairly universal message to focus on these simple moments?
I think, yeah, a universal message in
Yeah.
that you should appreciate those moments everywhere and throughout your life. But also, there's some that, for example, when I lived on the West Coast, which I love the Pacific Northwest. But people would always ask, what do you miss about Vermont or New England in general? And also, I talked to people out there were transplants as well, and they would often mention some of the same things. For instance, I really, really missed hearing cardinals singing
Mm,
during the spring and summer, and lightning bugs, this time of year when it's hot and humid, because you didn't
right.
get lightning bugs out there, a good thunderstorm, stuff like that.
Right.
So, there's some things that are unique to a place that you can experience, and then there are others that just being open to those experiences everywhere is important. And that's what's universal is, looking and listening and being in the moment, especially with, I don't know, sound maudlin Mother Earth, but but really that's, you know, for me, being in the outdoors and going for walks in the woods has been my salvation throughout life.
Right.
I tried to express that in the book as well,
Hmm.
how important it is. And I think a lot of people during COVID, there was probably an increase in number of people who there were fewer activities. But for instance, I'm in Wilder, Vermont now, and there's a trail up the road from the apartment here called the Hazen Trail, and I can easily go after work and go on the Hazen Trail and go for a walk, 2 mile walk, one way, 2 miles back in the woods
Right.
mostly, or by a few fields. And during COVID, there were a lot more people out in the woods,
Yeah.
uh, and I've noticed in the years since the numbers declining on this trail, so that sometimes I see nobody. So
And
there were more people getting connected, I think, with nature. I mean, one
right.
of the few positives of that time.
How many stories are in this book?
30 something. I mean, yeah,
Right. And it's a pretty good sized book. It's about 170 pages or so.
with lots of photographs. So, and
Right.
there's some chapters that are literally like 2 paragraphs, and there are others that are 4 pages long. It varies. And it was when I was sitting in that chair in Mount Vernon on a rainy November night, this stuff just came to me, and I just went with it. Um,
Hmm.
the ideas of how to write about this piece of land, and some were from my high school years, and some were from when I was later in life and still living in Vermont, and there are others from when I was on the West Coast and would come back and visit. So it covered a lot of years, decades of my life. Yeah.
And so Glenn, what's next for you?
Well, I'm hoping to sell a few of the books. I've been driving around the state on the weekends because I have a Monday through Friday job, and the last 4 Saturdays I've driven to various towns to bookstores and just walked in and say, "Would you carry this book? Would you be interested in carrying it?" And also my poetry book, which I never got to take around very much because COVID hit right after it was published. And in fact, it's kind of strange. Yesterday I was googling it, and I found that 7 Days had done a little review of my poetry book, and and it was April of 2020, and I was like, I never saw that. I never knew they reviewed it. It's like, oh, that's great. And it was a nice little review. So what
What's your poetry book?
it's called Coffee Grounds in the Worm in the worm for the worm
I saw that. Yes. Coffee grounds for the worm bin.
the worm
Yeah.
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 And I
Okay.
thought I thought that would be my last book because, as I said, I self-publish, and it's not, it's a bit expensive to self-publish, but I
Right.
did another one, and I'm I'm always writing stuff. I've got the makings of a novel. It's basically I do a lot of fiction, so this is basically a lot of interrelated stories. Um, I'm not sure what I
Right.
do with it. I have to do extensive editing. I've written tried to write short stories, and I've had like 7 or 8 short stories that, for whatever reason, evolve into novella length. And there's no
Nice.
market for novellas. I've submitted them a few places and been rejected, but it's like, oh well, I'm just going to keep writing whatever.
Right. Well, Glenn, you're gonna have to come back on when you get next time you get another book published. Come back on. We'll talk about it.
Okay, well, hopefully that'll be
And
soon.
so it's so and so, Glenn, if people want to learn more about your work, where is the best place they could go to?
Oh, they can go to check out the Phoenix Books website where the book is listed, or both books are listed there. I mean, it's available through other distributors as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what bookstores? I don't want to mention the bookstores. I've been to bookstores in St. Jay and Lindenville and Bradford. There's actually a little bookstore in Bradford, Vermont.
That's true. There is Starcat Books
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
and then Ludlow, and I went down to Brattleboro last weekend, and they took some copies. So I'm just hoping it'll get out there and a few people will buy it.
Right.
I set no expectations for it. As I said, I just needed to do it,
Right.
and hopefully somebody, it'll have some effect on somebody that reads it. My family members and friends like it, so
Yeah.
I think they're being sincere.
Perfect. Well, Glenn, it was great chatting with you. This has been fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Again, I appreciate you inviting me on the show. And I've looked at some of the past shows, like, wow, there's some big people on here.
Well, thank you so much, Glenn.
All right, thanks. And you hear the songbirds in the morning, and it's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And then we go to the Audubon site in Wellfleet, and that's another great spot. And Marconi, there's lots of great outdoor activity there, without swimming with the white sharks.
I just saw there was something it was one of those like little news stories that actually says, statistically speaking, you're more apt to get bitten by a human in New York City than you are being bitten by a shark.
Oh.
There is 10 times more reports of being bitten by a human in New York City than there is about being bitten by a shark.
Jeez.
All right. Let me do the intro, Glenn, and then we'll jump right into it. So